Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. I just got finished watching Roland Martin interview Richard Spencer, the white supremacist. And before I saw this interview, I kept hearing all these people hype it up. I kept hearing all these people talk about how Roland Martin destroyed this guy, how Roland Martin eviscerated this guy. So I had high expectations going in. And frankly, I was disappointed. Although they did debate issues, I just felt like what you had here was a reflection of a Negro type of mentality, of an integrationist mentality, of a mentality that's begging for acceptance, begging for recognition, begging for equality from a man who clearly and obviously has no respect for you, has no respect for black people, from a man who doesn't even view black people as full and equal human beings. But it seemed like Roland Martin was basically pleading his case that black people have contributed to humanity, pleading his case to a man that can't hear, pleading his case to a man who can't see, reasoning with a man who is incapable of reason. It's like someone throwing pearls before swine. Swine can't appreciate pearls. This man is a pig. This man is an enemy of our people. And I understand from a journalistic perspective why you would have someone on this program because it's good for ratings, it's good for dialogue, and all that kind of stuff. But we have to understand that these people are our enemies and they need to be treated as such. They don't need to be reasoned with, they don't need to be rationalized with, they don't need to be convinced that black people are good, that black people have contributed a lot to civilization. And frankly, I think that a lot of the arguments that were made during that interview were just weak. I mean, there were weak arguments on Spencer's side, and there were weak arguments on Roland Martin's side. And I think that what you had was a situation where emotion took over instead of reason. What you had was a situation where Roland Martin was talking all over this guy. And it's not, I don't give a damn about this white supremacist. I don't care about him talking over him. But if you're going to have a debate, then it should be something that's more structured. It should be something where ideas really do get thoroughly and fully debated and discussed. And it seemed like, unfortunately, you didn't really have that here. I think that at some points, there was a lack of, straight up professionalism. But yeah, I just thought that this was overhyped. I didn't think that Roland Martin destroyed this guy. I mean, he made some good arguments about a lot of things. But one thing that I was interested in is the point when they talked about race, and Roland Martin said that race doesn't exist and that it's a social construct. And then this man asked Roland Martin about his identity, and Roland Martin said that he saw himself as a man and as a Christian, and he didn't even get around to talking about seeing himself as a black man, as a black person. And when I hear people talk about this race as a social construct, I understand that. I get that. I understand that there are a lot of similarities between all of humanity. But when we deal with the reality of this world, race is real, whether it's a social construct or not. Our lives are structured and shaped by our racial identity. Black people are marginalized because of our racial identity. We are oppressed because of our identity. And it's time for us to stop running away from our identity and embrace it, to organize around it, to defend our interests as a people, to fight as a people, instead of begging for acceptance. One compelling part of this debate was about, Roland Martin talking about Christianity and how it was used to enslave black people. But yet, Roland Martin was boasting about how he's a Christian and how he has Christian values. And that racist turned it on him. He basically said, well, how are you espousing to be such a Christian and this and that when Christians basically enslaved you, when you wouldn't even have Christianity if it wasn't for white slave masters? And then Roland Martin went on to talk about how they were not properly interpreting Christianity, how they were using it falsely and they weren't interpreting the real Christianity. And then this guy, Richard Spencer, was talking about just the history of Christians. I mean, this country was founded by these so called Christians who didn't have any problem enslaving black people. And he talked about like the whole serfdom in Europe, where you had classes of people under Christianity. You had people that were reduced to serfs, which is just a fancy word for slaves in Europe. When you look at the Crusades, I mean, there's a lot of violence and oppression that goes along with the history of Christianity. And I think that this man raised a good point about that. And I don't think it was adequately addressed. You know, this modern interpretation of Christianity didn't apply for hundreds of years. I mean, for centuries. For centuries, these people that called themselves Christian were racist. You know, those Klansmen. What do they burn when they terrorize black people? Crosses. There are pictures of these Klansmen taking pictures, you know, near a sign that says Jesus saves. So that's something that these people that um, embrace this Christian religion, that's something that has to be addressed. And it's something that Roland Martin did not really adequately address in that debate. He didn't address that history. He just said, well, they just misinterpreted the religion when that had been the interpretation for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. These people that call themselves Christians conquered the world. They weren't turning the other cheek and loving their neighbors and all that stuff. So I just thought that that was a weak point in the debate. And then this whole issue, they had a debate about whether or not Egyptians were white or black Africans. And I just think that you know, Roland Martin really didn't address that well. You know, he did say, well, they're in Africa. You know, that was his only argument, that Egypt was in Africa. And, you know, that black people were the first people, but he didn't really go into depth because I really think that he was in over his head, like he doesn't know much about Egyptology and Egyptian history. Because people with knowledge of that, they could point out like which dynasties were black and they could point to the hieroglyphics and the symbols and the actual statues of black people in there and the mummies and the DNA evidence proving the linkage between the Egyptians and sub-Saharan Africa. All of that could have been broken down. But anyway, it's like really beside the point. I mean, it makes no sense trying to plead with these people to show them about our accomplishments, to show this racist our accomplishments. This man has no regard for black people. That movement has no regard for our people. So instead of like showcasing these people, giving them a platform to spew their hatred and misinformation, these people just need to be challenged. They need to be challenged. They need to be vigorously resisted and fought against politically. Because now these people are no longer on the corners. These people are no longer in the fringes of society. These people are in the White House. And as I said in the last video, that's nothing new. You've had plenty of white supremacists in power in this country. And our focus needs to be organizing against that movement, organizing against those who are opposed to us. Our efforts should not be trying to convince these people that we're human beings, trying to seek their acceptance and their love, because they have no love for you. They see you as a competitor. And the points about diversity and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that that was adequately addressed in this debate, because this guy was basically saying, well, these corporations are discriminating against white people in the name of promoting diversity and affirmative action. And, you know, I understand the overall point about how these white people make up majorities in certain companies and certain industries. But I don't think that the issue of affirmative action was thoroughly addressed. Like that issue could have been more thoroughly discussed. And I think for a discussion like this, you really need to have a, if you're going to have a debate with a white supremacist, it needs to be more structured, where you have a moderator, where it's organized. And I understand that this is a news program, so you can't possibly have that. But I just think that in terms of a discussion, in terms of an actual debate, it needs to be more structured. That's what I would be interested in, a real debate, not a contest of someone trying to basically run the dozens and someone talking over somebody else. That's not my idea of what real journalism is about. That's not my idea of a real debate. Um, so those are just some of my thoughts about this situation. Tell me what you think. And again, before people get it misconstrued, I think that, Roland Martin did make some valid points. He made strong points. But again, for too many parts of the segment, it was a lot of talking over people, not letting them finish his answer and all that kind of stuff. And I understand that because this is a white supremacist after all. Who gives a damn about his opinion? But if you're going to pretend to have a debate, then it should be a real debate. And for the most part, he did make some strong points. Like he really did make this guy look like a fool in some respects, because this guy was talking about how the Nazi symbol that they were using during that rally was just in fun and jest, that it was an expression of exuberance, which is ridiculous. Most people don't go around saluting in a Nazi fashion out of exuberance. There's nothing to be exuberant about with respect to the history of the Nazis. These people killed millions of Jews. They caused World War II. Millions of people died as a result of the Nazis. American soldiers died because of them, as Roland Martin pointed out. There's nothing funny about a Nazi gesture. That's despicable. And it's truly frightening that these people are back in the forefront now. Now that you have this Donald Trump being elected, a man who was elected on a campaign that appealed to the lowest aspects of humanity, appealed to racism and bigotry, xenophobia, sexism. It's really a disgrace. So those are my thoughts. Tell me what you thought about this debate. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.